Welcome to WPVM's City Council Primary Candidate Forum. This is part one of the forum. Part two will be coming up in a couple of days. Dr. Chris Cooper is the moderator. We have Sage Turner, Kim Roney, and Charles Domingo here for this part one of the forum. Dr. Cooper is the esteemed Robert Lee Madison Distinguished Professor and Director of the Hare Institute for Public Policy Institute at Western Carolina University. Dr. Cooper, I'm turning this over to you. Carry on.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for hosting this. Thank you for everybody who's listening and taking a part in the democratic process by making sure that you don't just cast a vote, but that you cast an informed vote. And in particular, I really want to reach out and thank the members, the folks that are running for office today and running for office on Thursday. It takes a lot to run for office. We need good people to run for office. We need competitive elections to run this thing we call democracy. And so I don't think we spend enough time in this country and in this community just taking our hats off to people who are running for office. They're running to make their community better. They're taking time out of their own schedules, and it's a lot, and we appreciate it. So before we get to the candidates and their platform, we're going to just tell you how this is going to go today. We've got about an hour together. I'm going to run through a little bit about the voting process, and then each candidate's going to start with 3-minute opening statements. I'll toss some questions out, and hopefully we'll learn a lot more about our candidates and their positions. Look, this election affects everybody who lives in Western North Carolina, whether you live in the city of Asheville or not. Asheville is, of course, the economic driver of the region. It is the cultural hub of the region. It matters no matter really where you live in the region. With that said, if you want to vote in this election, you can only vote if you live within the city limits. That's more confusing than it may seem like at first. There's a lot of folks who may think they live in city limits and they don't. If you're not sure, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Buncombe County Board of Elections does a great job. There's a sample ballot you can look up there. You can look up a sample ballot from the State Board of Elections, or you can just give the Buncombe County Board of Elections a call and ask them where you live, what your ballot's going to look like, and whether you can vote in this election or not. In-person early voting begins February 15th, runs through Saturday, March 2nd at 11 sites throughout Buncombe County, and Election Day itself is, of course, Tuesday, March 5th. Just a couple of things to note that are a little bit different this year. One, you do need to have an ID to vote or fill out a form that says why you don't have one, essentially. So that's one thing to take note of. Also, if you have a mail-in ballot, that needs to be received by the close of business on the election day, Tuesday, March 5th. There's no longer a grace period. So for those of you who are casting your ballot by mail, get it in sooner rather than later. This is also, it's a nonpartisan election, meaning regardless of which primary you select, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or you say no party at all, you're going to see these candidates on your ballot. So this is truly a primary for everybody, not a primary for people of a particular party. Speaking of candidates, you're going to have 8 of them on the ballot. You're going to select 3. The top vote getters will then move on to the general election ballot. So they seem a little confusing, but you're going to see some of these names again come November. Ultimately, 3 people will fill the seats on the Asheville City Council when it's all said and done. So now onto our forum. We'll begin with opening statements. These will be no more than 3 minutes per candidate. And in order, we will start with Councilmember Turner, and then we will go to Councilmember Roney, and then we will go to CJ Domingo.
Great. Are you ready for me? Wonderful. Well, thank you first off for hosting us today, Chris and Daphne. We appreciate it. I'm Sage Turner. I'm currently serving my first term on City Council, and I'm seeking re-election in 2024. I've lived in West Asheville for about 24 years and raised my family in Asheville. This is the longest I've lived anywhere, so I consider Asheville my home. In college, I was a city planning nerd, and in grad school as well. And these days, I've actually empty nested, and my youngest is in college themselves at App State, studying a similar field. A little bit just about me as a person. I'm a bit of a workaholic type, an environmentalist of types, and I spend my every waking moment working on projects or initiatives or things that can move us forward. And I think that's probably a great personality trait for someone that's serving on council, because we all have several jobs. I work another full-time job downtown Asheville for the French Broad Food Co-op. I handle all of their construction and finance and planning and budgeting, et cetera. And I've been there for over a decade, and I love my work in downtown and have a particular appreciation for downtown and its enormous capacity for helping the rest of the city afford itself. And we can talk more about that later. A little bit of background. For the last few years, I was elected in 2020 alongside Kim, and right out of the gate, we faced a little bit of a different situation for the city. It was right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and we were quickly charged with an enormous undertaking of dispensing several tens of millions of dollars in federal emergency funding. So we spent our first year really focused on things like that. And it was complex and rewarding. It was a kind of a one-time infusion into the city, and it took a lot of management. Additionally, we were seeing an uprising of sorts where cities across the U.S., including Asheville, were seeing maybe seeking a change in public safety and community response from public officials, calling for more diverse responses to growing mental health needs and housing crises. And while these efforts are still underway, they remain complicated. We've had setbacks along the way. We've had wins along the way. And if you've been paying attention to the news recently, you'll know we're continuing to deal with this problem. Each council member serves on a number of community committees and council committees. I myself serve on 9, and 2 of the ones that I chair are pretty crucial to the community. They're the affordable housing committees for council and for a 4-county region. To me, I think that affordable housing is our #1 crisis right now, and that's because it touches every other crisis that we have. We are quickly being priced out. We are not able to keep up with wages or supply for the growing demand in Asheville. And I consider my work on affordable housing to be one of my greatest strengths, but also passions and biggest needs for the community. I also serve on various committees around design and planning and getting into the nitty-gritty policy making of how we manage things like missing middle housing or hotel districts or short-term rental enforcement, for example. It's a field I love to be in. As I mentioned earlier, I studied city planning in grad school, and these things, I just find great joy in this work. It's been an honor to serve the city in this way, and I certainly hope that I can continue to. So thank you for your support today, and thank you for hosting us. As Chris said, the primary will be on March 5th, and I would really appreciate your vote.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Roney.
Friends and neighbors, my name is Kim Roney, and I'm running for re-election to Asheville City Council. My partner and I moved here in 2006, and I have deep family roots here because my great-grandmother was born in Kenilworth in 1910. I'm a community organizer with 20 years experience in community radio, and in fact was a DJ and a former music director at WPVM. This is my 25th year as a music educator, so there are new voters in this election that I have worked with since they were in kindergarten. They're one of the most important reasons why I'm running, to share in the work, to take better care of the people who live and work here on our planet. So many of us in Asheville are struggling to make ends meet, while an over-reliance on unchecked tourism strains our natural resources, burdens our infrastructure, and displaces our most vulnerable neighbors. But it's a matter of priorities. If we ensure that this is a great place to live and work, it'll also be a great place to visit. I have the privilege of serving on Asheville and North Carolina's first all-female council and now second all-female council. And I have the courage to say no, but I'm also committed to saying yes to affordability, public safety, and climate and neighborhood resiliency. You can find out more about what that means to me and how you can share the work at kimroneyforasheville.com.
Thank you so much. We'll go to CJ Dominguez next.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
All right. Hello, Asheville. I'm CJ Domingo. I'm running to be your city council representative. I'm an Asheville native going on, 37 years now. I started out in the food industry here. I worked as a waiter at a downtown restaurant. I went on to run and manage a grocery store. During COVID, I worked at a local pharmacy overseeing their delivery and home care operations. I worked for the city for a while as an operations supervisor down in parking services. I now work in the banking and finance industry. Like many of you, I've seen that many of our city's core infrastructures have started to crumble. Roads, water, garages, pools, all of these things. And the pool is a particularly shocking one because the place that I've gone basically every summer for 20 years is just not going to be able to open this year. And we had no plan for getting it fixed. I know that there's a place where people are struggling to stay ahead of inflation. And I know that the best and brightest that we raise here, their best hope for personal success is to get a job far away from here. I want to see this changed. I want to see that people have the opportunity to succeed in our community. And first and foremost amongst that is to give them the infrastructure which they deserve. I want to see that when people turn on the light switch, when they go to get water, when they go to drive or park downtown, if they want to go to the pool with their families, these things should just work. And too often we're finding out that these things, they knew there were a problem, but it happened at a closed door meeting. The news just reports that it turns out they knew since 2016, since 2018, since 2020. And even though that may have been available on a website somewhere, the people need to know not only how are these resources going, but how are they going to continue? So that way they can put that out of their mind and focus on finding success for themselves. I would also like to see a growth of sustainable job opportunities and not just wasteful dead-end jobs. I want to see true career opportunities that will allow people here to thrive, to buy a house if they want, to raise their families here if they want. I want success for all the people of Asheville. I'm running to be your voice on the city council. As your representative, I want to take a step to the future that works for all of us. My name's CJ Domingo. I'm running for Asheville City Council. If you'd like to know more, please check out my website, cj4avl.com. That's the numeral 4. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. We'll now move into questions. So we're going to have 2 minutes apiece on these, and try to rotate the order. So maybe we'll begin this time with Councilmember Roney, and then we will go to CJ Domingo, and then end with Councilmember Turner, if that's all right. Asheville is experiencing what some have called a crisis in homelessness. What is your experience with this issue, and what strategies should the city of Asheville pursue to help people who are unhoused in our community? So, Councilmember Roney.
Sure. Thank you so much for asking this important question. So I serve as the liaison to the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee. And right now we are acting on 112 recommendations in the National Alliance to End Homelessness report. And the goal is to reduce homelessness in our community by 50%. I believe that we can do that if we stay committed to the recommendations and we work together. And the partnerships that we need the most include our neighbors that are experiencing homelessness and our neighborhoods. So one of the recommendations is that we completely change the way that we manage homeless crisis. And so we're going to have a new continuum of care. So this will be an outside entity instead of inside of the city. That means it'll be owned by the community, and it means that you can participate. Individuals and organizations, so schools and businesses and neighborhood groups can join our continuum of care right now. Coming up this spring, we're going to set the board and then set forward the priorities in the next step on how we meet these recommendations and reduce homelessness. How should we address homelessness? We know that it's a matter of access to healthcare and housing. I believe that housing and healthcare are human rights. So that means that we need to work really diligently to build deeply affordable housing for the people who live and work here, on corridors close to groceries and jobs and resources and education opportunities. But it also means keeping people housed, which is why it's important that we fund eviction protection and work with our partners that are doing the work on the ground to address homelessness, behavioral health crisis, eviction protection. And once again, you can share in this work with us. Please check out ashevillennc.gov and look for homeless strategies, and that'll show you how to join the continuum of care.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll go to CJ Domingo next, please.
Hey there. So my experience with this is firsthand. I worked for the city down in parking services, and so a key part of that job every single day was dealing with the externalities of the unhoused crisis. I think that what I learned from doing that is that we do need a multivariable approach that will allow us to deal with the different types of homeless, if you would, because some folks need a small amount of help. Some folks need a lot of mental and medical help. Some folks, it seems that they don't have any faith in a system. They are not interested in anything that we would try to do to help them. And so the best thing that we can do in that circumstance is to essentially reduce the external harm that happens to our citizens, our business owners, people who are visiting, everybody. I think that a number of approaches could work. We could do a housing first model. We could do continuum of care. We could do combinations. But I think that we really need to get complete buy-in from the community. We cannot rely on these outside companies to come help if they're going to turn around and leave us high and dry and short another, I think it was $150,000, $250,000. I want to know that we are not only going to trust people here to find success for our problems, but we are also going to hold those solution makers accountable. I also would like it if we could find a way that works for the various communities, because just telling people in West Asheville or East Asheville, it's okay, we have a plan for your unhoused down here at downtown, they have no mechanism by which to encourage people to go make use of those services. I think that the first and foremost would be to try and make sure that we have a good system, everybody understands it, everybody's bought into it, and then just commit hard, constantly check, constantly iterate.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll go to Councilmember Turner next, please.
Yes, thank you. And great, very important question. For me, the answer to homelessness is one word: housing. It's housing. It's that simple, really. And it does become more complex the more we look into it. As Kim mentioned, the National Alliance to End Homelessness is a large study that we completed. It was in partnership with Buncombe County and Dogwood Health Trust. And it has taught us a very important thing, that we as a city cannot handle it alone. So historically, what we have been doing is going out into the community as a requirement by HUD to receive federal dollars, and once a year hitting the streets and counting folks. This is called a pit count, point in time, and we just did it on January 31st again. And from that data, we are supposed to extrapolate all of the occurring unhoused folks and their situations in our community. And I don't think that one little check is enough. So I'm continuing to push us to do these checks and counts multiple times a year and as the seasons change. But the goal for the city, we understand we are not going to be able to completely eradicate unhoused folks. It's unhousing, I guess, homelessness, excuse me. But we know our goal is to make it rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. And those are the three keywords: rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. So when we see folks that are nearing homelessness, who may lose their apartment if one paycheck is missed, et cetera, that's where we need to step in and protect with eviction protections or community resources if possible. To make it rare, we need to create these entities like you're seeing with the Days Inn, where we have permanent supportive housing. So if you're entering a situation where you have been reoccurring homelessness, then you can enter a situation where there's wraparound services and greater care to help you become housed again and how to manage being housed. Brief, also, we can reach things like the Days Inn, but we also need something that's currently missing in the community, and that is a tool where folks can get what I would say a one-stop hub. If you are suffering from things like not having identification, if you are suffering from a mental issue or an addiction, we need a hub where one person can walk in and find the resources they need, get aligned with the care and programs and programmatic partners, and begin the transition. To me, that is what we're really missing. We have partners in the community doing pieces of this. And what we're realizing now as a part of the study is that we're not all collaborating effectively. All of the tools we have are somewhat overlapping or pieces here and there, but we're not all on the same team working towards the same goals. And that is what we hope to do with this new continuum of care model, where the city will be one party at the table and no longer running the entire show. And I think that's a very critical thing to recognize, because it's not just Asheville that is facing this homelessness issue. It is all over the United States. It's become a larger thing than one city could ever handle. It is my opinion that we need greater resources, whether it's federal or state. Even if it's just recognition and funding comes later, we need to recognize the problem is much larger than any little individual government can ever solve. And until we do that, we're going to be doing stopgap solutions. We're going to be helping.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll just give an opportunity for if anybody has any rebuttals they would like to put in. Council member, Roney. Very glad she's not running for Congress right now, probably. Council member Roney.
I'm thankful to serve my city here on Asheville City Council. I think one part of the puzzle that's missing, right, is when community-driven solutions come forward, like the Beloved Tiny Village, where Beloved is working with community partners and business partners to build housing for the most vulnerable people in our community in a neighborhood, within a neighborhood, close to resources, then we should really get behind it. And I find it disconcerting that we say that we want deeply affordable housing, but when Beloved applied for dollars for our ARPA fund to be a partner with them in that work, it was one of the highest equity and feasibility ranked scores for our ARPA process, but we didn't have enough council support to get behind it. So that tells me that we need to get deeply affordable housing to address homelessness, but we actually have to do it with dollars, and we're not doing that. So we need transparency and accountability too to get the work done.
Great. Thank you very much. CJ Domingo, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. So, and I really appreciate the opportunity. I was going to say that for these affordability plans, they're great. And I do think that Beloved Village will go on to be very successful. But when I was talking about trying to include members of the community, I've talked to many folks over there as part of my political campaign. And by and large, many people who live nearby said they were completely surprised to discover that this initiative was going on. I think that NIMBYism can be an enemy to success, but I do think that it's fair to tell people what's going to be happening in their community, what the city's planning. I do not like the idea that we are waiting for some far-off solution. I do think that we could find tangible successes today that can help to alleviate some of the pains that not only our residents and businesses are feeling, but the unhoused themselves are feeling. From my time working in the city, I found that many of them were completely unaware of these public resources that do exist because the city tries to centralize things, which is good for reducing costs, but bad for outreach. I think that we need to have more opportunities to reach to each of these communities, to each of these different groups, and even the homeless encampments, to reach them where they are. We can't rely on them to come to us.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilmember Turner?
Sure, just real quick. Overall housing construction in general. Sometimes I feel like the community feels there's a disconnect when we are approving large apartment complexes and fighting for 20 units to be affordable versus seeing the number of unhoused and how deeply affordable it needs to be. But I want to make sure we tie the two together. Housing construction is so key. One example is one of our community partners, Helpmate, who houses folks who have experienced domestic violence, has had to come to us this year and say, the funds that we are being awarded can no longer work in this community because the rents are so high. So we had to make special rules for our community partners to reach into housing in other neighboring counties just to find rents that can meet the subsidies we have. So we're having an overall housing crisis that is making it worse and worse and worse for those deeper affordable dollars.
Great. Thank you so much. Great answers all the way around. Ask another question in a second, but just as far as logistics, we will begin this time with CJ Domingo and then go to Councilmember Turner and then to Councilmember Roney. So since at least 2012, there's been talk in Asheville of creating a business improvement district as a way to raise funds to improve downtown Asheville in ways that improve services in this critically important part of our city. Recently, the Asheville Area Chamber of Commerce sponsored a readability study and draft management plan to assess community thoughts around the idea. what is your take on the business improvement district in Asheville, or the idea of a business improvement district in Asheville? So we'll begin with CJ.
Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry.
Okay, great.
The computer hung up for a second there.
Yeah.
So okay, there we go. Sorry, it hung up again. A business improvement district, it can be a good idea. Devil's in the details. I want to know exactly how does it work, because business improvement districts can traditionally be an opportunity for stakeholders in the community to make decisions that work for them without the bureaucracy of the council writ large. However, at the same time, I'm concerned about limitations placed on free speech for the people who don't necessarily jive with the business improvement district's plans. I'm also concerned about how sometimes, in the ways that business improvement districts have worked in other cities, the larger business members can use it as a cudgel to curtail opportunities for smaller businesses, particularly those that are just outside of the improvement district. It really comes down to oversight. It comes down to public buy-in, and it comes down to how it's written.
So much, Councilmember Turner.
Sure, thank you. So I've long been a proponent of a business improvement district. That does not mean I'm automatically going to support it. And I say that because the top concerns for me are whether or not the businesses in downtown can afford this right now. If they are not the owner of their building and they're a renter, the cost will surely be passed to them anyways. And downtown has been undergoing a lot of change right now, and I'm concerned about the support of the businesses. I am also concerned about who is sitting at that table making these decisions, and it should be representative of the downtown businesses of all types, not just large businesses, for example. And I am also concerned about any kind of involvement from the Tourism Development Authority, which is the body that already receives tens of $millions in taxes each year to invest in the community. And I do not want them to be at this table simply doing more of that. So if we can find a way for the right folks to be at the table, for the tax to not be so disruptive that it impacts businesses horribly, then I could find myself supporting. I do think one of the things that I was disappointed to find is that in the state of North Carolina, if we enact this, we cannot create different ranges of taxation for different uses. For example, a hotel cannot pay more than a bookstore. And for me, that is problematic.
Councilmember Roney.
Well, you asked this question right on time, because I just came from the first of 3 meetings that the chamber is hosting today with their stakeholders. Right now, I'm listening to both the new voices that are advocating for a business improvement district, but also the neighbors and business owners who had experience with the lessons learned from the last bid attempt. Some of the concerns I'm hearing: lack of trust with the process. In general, that's probably across the board for the city and the people who live and work in Asheville. So that'll be a big barrier to overcome if we're going to work together on this. I'm hearing concern about the base level of core services we currently provide. So bids are meant to serve above and beyond what a city or a county already provide. An example of that: we're currently not doing everything that we could to match behavioral health crisis with a behavioral health response that is designed and for folks uniquely qualified to address those concerns. So because we don't already have a base level of service there, what does it look for us to have a holistic response? Adding a bid on top of a base that's lacking won't address that concern, but we will pay more property taxes. And so that's the other concern I'm hearing is, what does accountability look like for yet another unelected body overseeing a property tax like our Tourism Development Authority does? So what are some of the lessons learned? How can we move forward better? My curiosity after today's conversation is twofold. One, I've worked late nights downtown Asheville and had to commute home after midnight in the service industry. And so because the bid is meant to end at midnight, what does that look like? But also for residents, because downtown is a neighborhood.
Terrific. Thank you. And we will kind of loop back through to see if anybody has any responses or rebuttals. So CJ, we will pop to you next.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like we're somewhat on the same page there in that we want to know exactly what it looked like. There's a lot of questions about could it work? It's really down to the details.
Fantastic. Okay. Councilmember Turner?
Sure. I'll just quickly add, I understand this is coming at us fast, that if possible, the chamber would like to see it happen in this next budget cycle. So I am concerned about the level of input and timing for the community's sake, and I'm hopeful that we can slow down if needed.
Great. And Councilmember Roney?
Yeah, I agree. Today, I saw a lot of green lights and a lot of yellow lights, which means people still have questions. And that gets back to kind of what CJ was talking to earlier is we'll come up with a solution and then kind of spring it on folks last minute, and there's not time to go slow and at the pace of community to make sure that there's buy-in. And this is another situation where we could see some benefits for our community if we address the concerns. And if not, we may see some pushback around whether or not it happens at all. So once again, I think it's important to learn from what happened with the last bid program and then see what are the gaps we're trying to identify. Is a new property tax the way to do it?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to the next question here. And I think we'll begin, if my notes are correct, with Councilmember Turner, and then Councilmember Roney, and then CJ Domingo. As you know, North Carolina is not a home rule state. And so what that means, of course, is that local governments and municipalities like the city of Asheville must work in consultation with state government on many issues, frankly, they wouldn't have to in some other states. Sometimes that relationship has been productive and collaborative. Other times it's been a little tense. How do you see the relationship between the city of Asheville and state government here in North Carolina? And how would you work with the state to get better outcomes for the city and its residents? Councilmember Turner will begin.
Sure, great question. I feel like this is one that lots of residents don't realize. In my inbox every day, I will get an email that says, why can't you just fix this? I don't understand. Why can't you have rent control? Why can't we have what other communities have and have a required affordability component in every housing project? And the answer is exactly as Chris has spelled out. We are in a state that the state legislators have to give cities express permission to do something. And without that express permission, we are assumed to not be able to do it. I can use rent control as an example. So it would be ideal. We would have more affordability in this community if we could just enact rent control and say the buildings in this project that you're proposing will not have rents above this threshold. But we're quite literally not allowed to do that. So for us to do so, to mount some kind of campaign where the state may change that rule, we have to partner with other cities. So it's not that Asheville and the legislators directly need to have great relationships, not just that, because that is also true, but it's that we need to have great relationships with other strong cities. So we've seen this in the short-term rental issue throughout the state, where we're starting to partner with like Chapel Hill and Raleigh, and even Boone came into the mix around better regulations for short-term rentals. And the only success I've really seen at a state level is when several communities get together and work with their officials and push it over the finish line and make it have enough momentum to really get done. And I think that's what's going to take. It's also going to take some of our local officials continuing to move up the line, like Senator Julie Mayfield did. She's been a wonderful asset at the state. You can call her anytime, and that relationship really does matter.
Great. Thank you so much. Councilmember Roney.
So yeah, I explained the situation with home rule or Dillon's rule state, like if you're trying to go to Earth Fair and get a Pepsi. My nephews went down every single aisle. They can't find one. And that's how it works in North Carolina. If it's not in the legislature or in the case law, cities aren't allowed to put their own regulations into place. That said, we can build coalitions across North Carolina. For example, when House Bill 2, the notorious bathroom bill, passed, we worked with cities and counties across the state to pass LGBTQ plus inclusive non-discrimination ordinances that also included protections for veteran status, pregnancy status, and natural hair that were not already protected. What does that mean? It means that when the city sees discrimination, like housing discrimination based on source of income, that we could start to document those discriminations and help to stand up for people's access to housing and for their human rights and access to public places. Another example of what we can do is work with cities across the state on things like being able to have civilian traffic investigators. Our Senator Julie Mayfield worked on that at one level, but ended up passing in another level of the state house so that every city can now have civilian traffic investigators. So when there is, let's say, a fender bender, instead of having to send an armed law enforcement officer, you can have trained civilian investigators that can go to the accident and free up our staff to deal with the very serious issues of violent crime, especially while our staffing levels in APD are so low.
Great. And CJ Domingo.
Hey there. So I think that fundamentally our relationship between the city of Asheville and the state is one that, yes, it can be a little fractious sometimes. We have different goals, we have different objectives because our community is so very unique. And I do appreciate the example that Councilmember Roney put out, looking for a Pepsi at Earth Fair. That's a very apt analogy. I do think that there are different ways to approach different problems. Some things you can sidestep. If they don't have a rule that allows you to enact, say, as was brought up, rent control, we could say that instead of trying to find a solution that requires this very specific answer, we could try to attack the problem from another way, which is part of building housing, is part of trying to introduce new jobs to the region. I think that it really comes down to building relationships, as both council members have brought up, building relationships at the state level to try and make solutions for those problems. It's a case-by-case basis, though.
And give everybody one more bite at the apple. Council member, almost said Congress member again. Council member Turner, would you like to kick us off that?
Not quite Congress. Yeah, I think we're all in a basic agreement here that it's going to take the relationships and maybe even just greater publicity around it. Recently, I've been concerned about the short-term rentals and our lack of ability to enforce them. And there's, I think, an article floating around in the Citizen Times this week around how some of these platforms, quite frankly, have the tools that we need, but refuse to turn them on. And if cities like Asheville and Boone and Raleigh, et cetera, could join together and get some of those companies like Airbnb to enact these tools for us, then we're stronger, we have the resources, and we can implement the actual rules on the ground. And I think it's just going to take those relationships and the courage to push forward.
And Councilmember Roney.
Yeah, I'm so glad that example was given, because in 2021, I worked with another member of council to do exactly that, to work with Airbnb, VRBO, and Expedia on a city portal tool. The city portal tool makes it so that you set a standard for how properties are listed for short-term rentals. And if they're not compliant, they're automatically removed at the listing level. The anticipation is that between 350 and 500 short-term rentals that are illegal would have been automatically kicked off of those listing sites. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough council support to get it done. So once again, transparent processes, doing the people's work in public, and then holding council accountable to meaningful action is something I'm committed to doing.
And CJ Domingo.
Yeah, on the specific topic of short-term rentals, I think this is a place where chasing after the companies to provide us the tools that we need to protect our communities is kind of playing whack-a-mole. As we've seen with Uber, as we've seen with Verbo, as we've seen with Airbnb, these so-called disruptors really just come in and reinvent an existing service and then turn around and take advantage of the fact that they found a niche where our laws were insufficient in the first place. In the case of short-term rentals in the city, however, I think that we need to try and find durable solutions at the city level that will allow us to protect what our citizens need from the city. I think that we should be working as hard as we can to enforce what's in place. And I think that we need to use every resource the city does have to make those solutions happen.
Fantastic. Thank you all three for thoughtful answers. That's the next question in a second. And in the order here, we will go Councilmember Roney and then Councilmember Turner and then CJ Domingo. So crime in Asheville has been a topic that's spilled out beyond the city's border. The New York Post, Fox News feature what they describe as a spike in Asheville crime. And Congressman Edwards, of course, recently held an anti-crime summit at AB Tech. But others, including Buncombe County Sheriff Quentin Miller, have pushed back against this narrative, calling it inaccurate and not backed up by facts. What is your take on crime in Asheville? Is it rising? Is it a problem? And perhaps most importantly, what is the proper role of the City Council in this debate? And we'll begin with Council Member Roney on this.
Thank you so much for this important question. So first of all, I want to start with, I believe that everyone in Asheville deserves to be safe. But using a narrow lens of public safety limits our responses and sometimes creates new problems. So first of all, I trust the sheriff when he shows me the numbers and the new information that's coming from our interim police chief, that violent crime is down. Now, when we criminalize poverty, things like trespassing and open container. So if you're have an open container and you're a tourist, will you be approached the same way as if you have less resources? Those are questions that our community needs to have because we need to work to, once again, keep everyone safe. We often aren't refusing to send the right person with the right tools and training. And for me, taking better care of the people who live and work here means matching behavioral health crisis with behavioral health responders uniquely qualified to connect people with behavioral health care. If we wanted to, we could partner with the county to grow the community paramedicine program. So this isn't a far off dream. We see the sheriff working to send a co-responder model. Raleigh is following Durham's lead in having a heart program, which is getting really great outcomes in matching people with the care they need during crisis. So we can either choose to do business as usual, which is doing nothing, and I think the risk is too high and the cost is too great, or we can meet this moment with a meaningful response and make sure that we have a holistic response to health and well-being and safety in our community, and not just for downtown, but for our whole city.
Fantastic. Thank you. Councilmember Turner.
Sure, thank you. So I believe that keeping the community safe is a basic role of government. It is near the top of the list of what we must provide as a government and why folks are paying taxes. It seems to me right now we're having a complex community conversation around what is safe, what does it look like, what does it feel like, and what does it feel like to different people. And I think that's what we're sensing here in some of the conversations we've seen between APD and the sheriff and the changing narratives. To me, you should have a reasonable expectation to be in your home and in your neighborhood and at your place of work and traveling throughout the city and feeling safe. So if we're not able to address that, there are several reasons right now. One is just, as we've talked about for years, our general lack of staffing capacity. So we are thankfully seeing an increase in officers and officer training and in retention. And that has been in part due to particular programs that we pointed right at this problem, where we started doing sign-on bonuses, retention bonuses, and lateral hires, where we go into other communities where we have experienced officers and try and convince them to come and work in our department, where the training does not take a year to become ready to be an officer. We also need different types of approaches, like we've said with the community paramedics and the fire department that goes around downtown and just does wellness checks on folks preemptively, because we know that crime and right now in Asheville being unhoused are getting associated with each other, and that is not always the correct assessment. You can be unhoused and have your own issues and it not be related or creating crime. And I don't like that we're getting those two conflated. So we need to be really clear in these approaches. But if we can continue to improve our community paramedics, continue to put more vehicles into the hands of those folks like Claire, who runs the program, they are an outstanding bunch of individuals who have been able to make significant progress and help individuals right then and there that day. And we need more of that. Not everything needs an officer responded to. Additionally, what was mentioned earlier with Julie Mayfield's success in the bill for the accidents, things like this, creative solutions that allow our officers to free up to do the work that is so important in keeping us safe.
Fantastic. Thank you. And CJ Domingo.
This is an issue that I feel very strongly about. In my role at the city, I called on the police a number of times looking for help, not just because of issues of people who were refusing to recognize a trespass order, but because people were getting into violent altercations, because people were had been using substances that caused them to be non-responsive. And for me, it was unconscionable that when I would call and say, I have a person who's in crisis, the response time to get somebody from downtown to downtown could be 10, 20, 30 minutes. When we had a violent issue where somebody had attacked another person inside of our parking areas, when I called for the police to help, it still took 27 minutes to respond. The people cannot rely on a ideal goal of trying to find a just right solution for all problems if in the meantime, when they call for help, the help doesn't just show up. When they call the police, when they call the fire, when they call for medical, it just needs to be there. It has to work. I do recognize that we could be looking at community response issues, as Councilmember Roney talked about, for bringing people to let cops not be there for traffic accidents. That could work. It's all about details. But in the meantime, we have people who have their cars broken into. There's been a whole spate of those in the last few weeks, actually last several months. And for the most recent ones, people are telling me they just stopped calling the police because every time they do, they're told they don't have the resources to come help. I would like us to look at maybe understanding a bit more about why did we have that mass exodus? Why are we still struggling to bring people on board? What can we do to make a simple solution that works today while we pursue these good long-term goals?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And in lieu of rebuttals on this one, I think we just have a little bit of time left, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for closing statements. So I'm going to see if we can just move to another question, give folks the 2 minutes again on one more question, if that's all right. So, and for this question, we will, let's see here, begin with CJ, if we can, please, and then move to Councilmember Roney and then Councilmember Turner. My notes are correct. So, the final question before we move into closing statements. Over 3 years ago, the city of Asheville passed a reparations resolution. About 2 years ago, City Council appointed the initial membership to the Reparations Commission. How do you assess the city's progress on reparations? And does the City Council itself have a role to play at this point? If so, what does that look like? CJ?
All right. So I think that as it comes to reparations, it's really about getting with the community, making sure people understand what's going on, making sure that that's still a solution that people are supporting. I think that when it comes to finding a way to try and heal some of the hurt that people have felt from the long-term, I would say, lack of economic opportunity that many members in our community have had because of past racist laws, racist programs, I think that we can find solutions. I just think that we need to be constantly asking, is this working? Are we doing what we need to do? And is this what the people really want?
And then we'll go next to Councilmember Roney.
Thank you so much. So I've been attending the Reparations Commission meetings and the Impact Focus Area meetings, IFAs. And I just want to start with saying that I believe that reparations are necessary and possible and key to a hopeful future for our city and our youth. I think we should be ready to respond meaningfully to the recommendations that are being made by people most impacted by the harms that are being documented, addressing issues of healthcare, housing, criminal justice, education, and economic development. And the ripple effects we know can be profound. It's a worthwhile cause. Do I think it's effective? Yes. Gathering people together to talk about these really hard and serious issues, to review data, and to come up with a plan to repair the harms that have been done, to engage in truth telling and to hear these difficult stories will give us a chance to plan for a better future. When the folks that are in the community that are not at the reparations community table are coming together through community organizing efforts like with the RJC, I think that tells me that we have an opportunity to support our internal process and our neighbors that are adding to the conversation as well. And so back in 2022, there was an opportunity to buy the Talbert lot next to the transit center. And I suggested to the city manager and my colleagues on council that we could use the most restricted funds to buy that. And that freed up $1.2 million from the sale of White Labs, which was land that was taken from the city or by the city during urban renewal and redlining. And so we were able to move that $1.2 million into the reparations fund But those funds are not yet being invested into the community and to the people. And so that's the big call that I hear. And so I'll amplify today is the call to cut the check. And we're not there yet, but I believe that we will find a way and it's possible.
Great. And Councilmember Turner.
Yes, thank you. So I believe this process has been, I'd say, amazing, really, in part because of the way it started. And that was, we went into the community and said, who should be at this table when we discuss this very important conversation of reparations? And we saw local leaders, legacy neighborhoods put forth their grandmothers of sort, the folks who had experienced the issue in Asheville themselves. And we got them together at a table to discuss. And I think that there is probably not a better formative way to have started the process than that, to actually take families and community members who have been directly impacted and hear from them directly. So while I might think it'd be great if it moved a little quicker, I'm more than happy to have the patience to sit back and listen and learn. And that's what's happening. So we have, like, right early on, we got a request for a seize the harm audit. The Reparations Commission was able to point to one tool that would really help them continue to do the work. And so we were able to take that on and do it and complete it. And there are other things that have come up recently about extensions for time. I think that's warranted as well. But from my perspective, I am waiting for this group to collaborate and then the neighborhoods to come together and tell us really what they think is going to be needed and how it might even be achieved. Because I think we're going to face other issues at a state level about how we can enact programs that may be specific to race or not, and particularly around housing and fair housing laws. We can't do that. So we're going to have to get creative. But I'm helpful, and I'm hopeful that the community will continue to educate itself as well. So there are some members of the community I know that do not understand this process and maybe wish it wasn't happening or would like to learn more. And I think that part is imperative too. We need to continue to educate the community on why we're even doing this in the first place and how it goes back to redlining and how it goes back to urban renewal and why it is, in fact, the city's responsibility to take this on their behalf. So I'm very hopeful for the process. I'm excited to see what comes from it. And I think we're fortunate to be experiencing this in our community at this time.
Great. Thank you so much. And that exhausts the questions that we have time for today. Certainly not the questions that are on everybody's minds, but I thought that was a really good, informative discussion of some of the most major issues facing our city. And so we'll close out in order with Councilmember Turner and then CJ Domingo. And then the final will be Councilmember Roney. And this is their 3-minute closing statement, last words they would like to leave with the voters of the city of Asheville. So Councilmember Turner.
Thank you. And thank you, Chris. And thank you, Daphne, for having us today and for hosting this on WPVM. I really appreciate the time. I think the simplest way for me to close out today would be to suggest ways you can get in touch with me. So you can always message me directly, email me directly, but the biggest tool I have is my website, sage4asheville.com. And I've put a tool up there where you can go on and ask me a question and you can expect a response from me, and I will post it on the website itself. So I encourage folks to get in touch, to attend events that I throw, and check out the website and see if you want to add a question or if there's some volume of information there that you may learn something from. It is my honor to serve this committee in the capacity that I have for the last few years, and I would certainly like to do so again. So I'm asking for your support, and I'm Sage Turner for Asheville 2024. Thank you.
I would like to echo that as well, saying that probably the best way to learn more about anything that you would have a question about is you can visit my website, cj4avl.com. That's the numeral 4, cj4avl.com. I also have a contact link on there where you can reach me. You can also shoot me an email at domingo4avl@gmail.com. I'm interested in hearing anything that anybody has to say because I want to learn more about how our council can better reflect the needs of our community, how we can help to tackle the problems that you're facing, and how we can make tangible results that work soon rather than ones that will take decades to get rolled out, tested, found, and then eventually deployed. I think that we have an opportunity here to build a better Asheville, one with a future that works for all of us. I hope that you'll support me and my role to try and become your voice on the city council, to become your city council representative. As was said at the beginning of the broadcast, I want to remind everybody that early voting begins February 15th, runs through March 2nd, and then Election Day itself is on March 5th. Thank you so much. And thanks WPVM for hosting. Thanks, Chris, for moderating.
Thank you so much to WPVM for hosting this forum. Independent community radio is critical to elevating local issues and independent voices. I love my city. I have the courage to say no, to prioritize people and planet over profit, and the consistent leadership to say yes to affordability, public safety, and climate and neighborhood resiliency. My work with and for Asheville so far has included initiating urban forestry programming, protecting neighborhoods from hotel encroachment, identifying funds for deeply affordable housing, expanded transit, and reparations, insisting on fair water rates to keep our water on instead of the deep discounts for the largest commercial accounts, because I know that keeping our water on is critical for public health, but it's also good for business. Protecting renters, veterans, LGBTQ residents, and our reproductive rights, ending the behind-the-scenes check-in meetings so we're doing the people's work in public, and pressing for living wages for city staff to provide the services our community deserves and so they can live in the community they serve. Mark your calendars to vote early in the March 5th primary, starting on February 15th. You can get more information on my campaign and to join the movement at kimroneyforasheville.com.
Thank you so much, everybody, and thanks to the listeners for engaging in this the conversation about our city and the future of the city.
And thank you, Dr. Cooper, and thank you, candidates. This interview and this forum will be available to everyone on social media, YouTube, and on WPVM's website at wpvmfm.org. Click on the politics button and it'll take you to all of this current forum and all of our past ones. Thank you, everyone, again.